pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please? Do we have somebody do roll?
Left us a sheet for it.
Where Nick normally sits.
We kind of got booted last time.
Second, let me get
See, if we had an organizational chart, we wouldn't have this problem.
Well, we have a new member tonight, and I haven't. Otherwise, I'd just rattle it off. Well, we can have our new member tell me his last name, and then I can go through everybody and.
Kolber, Kolber.
Okay, thank you. All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we know he's here. So Kucera,
Here.
Hara,
Here.
Fitzer,
Here.
Redmond,
Here.
Solomon,
Here.
Nushai.
Yes, here.
All right, and Mr. Watson reported that he would be absent.
Correct.
And then we have one vacancy as well, so.
But we do have a quorum, so we're okay to
Yes.
go.
We're good to go.
Okay, and we can approve the agenda that's currently in front of us unless somebody has any changes they'd like to make to the agenda. Seeing none, I'll just approve this agenda. And we'll move on to the approval of the regular meeting minutes from January 10th, 2023.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from January 10, 2023.
Support.
Motion support, any changes, corrections? Roll call, please.
I'll help him if it's all right. So Susie's doing
Oh,
too
yeah,
much.
right.
I'll start left to right. Mr. Nushay.
Yes.
Mr. Colbert.
Yes.
Mr. Becerra.
Yes.
Mr. Hara.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting minutes are approved. Agenda item number 6 is a public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here from the public wishing to speak?
We have one
If
back
so,
here.
please come to the microphone and give us your name and your address, please.
Hello, my name's Kareem Rabah. This is my wife.
Hi, Dr. Ayman Khalik.
So we are both pediatric dentists. We're married with one child right now, and we are looking to open our first practice. You know, we're working with a pretty good team, a really, really good team, and we have surveyed a lot of spots in Metro Detroit, and the city of Clawson is, you know, something that resonates with a lot of what we want to do. You guys seem to be extremely forward-thinking, you know, from a, you know, urbanist standpoint and from what you're doing for young families, you know, with the school grant that I heard about and various other things. We feel like it would be a great place for us to open our clinic, and also we would offer a great service to the community. Right now, there are very few pediatric dentists in Michigan. I mean, I had a patient today that told me the earliest they could get in was a year at any clinic. I have patients from West Branch drive to see us pretty much at least once a week. And we think we can offer a lot to the community. That being said, we have found several spots, and one spot in particular that kind of caught our eye. And we're looking to possibly, or we're trying to get it rezoned so that it could be a healthcare purpose. So that's why we are here before you today.
Joe would know more about that. What zone are they looking in? Is it?
Yeah, we actually are going to be talking about it. It's the BRD1 district.
Okay.
basically it's not a permitted use there now, and we were going to have a discussion as to whether or not it should be in that district, rather than trying to rezone the property, actually looking at changing the district.
Right, okay. We'll see what we can do for you.
Thank you.
So the conversation will be coming.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will close public discussion, and we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is a zoning ordinance discussion on the BRD 1 district uses, medical office, residential.
And here's that discussion.
Segued right in.
Right into it. All right. Let me get that open here. Yeah, the BRD one, I have 2 items in here, but we're going to take them one at a time. Sorry, that's the wrong folder. In the BRD1 district, which is on South Main, basically between the boundary of Royal Oak and kind of the southern end of downtown, that little corridor is BRD1. So I've included the intent statement of the BRD1 district in this memo that I provided to you, so that you could all see that what the purpose of the district is supposed to be according to the zoning ordinance. And it's among other things, it says the intent of the district is to allow for uses and provide site design guidelines that will enable optimal use of the existing parcels. Most of the parcels are small; they don't have a functional layout. There's they're legacy parcels, and the end of that first paragraph says the district is intended to provide opportunities to a variety of office and commercial uses serving the needs of the community. So when we look at the actual list of uses that's permitted in a district, we see that it says professional offices, but it doesn't say medical offices. And medical offices are called out separately in other districts of our ordinance. So we know that our ordinance treats them as a distinct use. So the question before us tonight, which was raised by the folks who just spoke, is should medical offices be something you can do in this district? Is there a reason that we think they shouldn't be included? The intent statement of the district itself calls for office uses. And it doesn't specify professional office uses either. It just says office uses in general. So when Nick and I went to the ordinance and looked at this, we thought, well, why wouldn't we permit medical offices in this district? We couldn't really see a reason. So I guess that's the question before you is, should we be adding medical offices to this district as an available use?
Joe, I have a question. In general, if someone's seeking a different use, what stops them from putting in like a, sorry, I can't think of I've got it written down. Like a PUD, or like, is there a way to go about it in that way, in a general sense of,
well, to use a
accommodating.
PUD just to put a use in the district that's not otherwise permitted in the use in the district with
Yes.
no other changes, that's actually prohibited under our PUD ordinance. You
Is
can't,
it?
yeah, you're not supposed to use a PUD just to put something put a use in the district that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do in the district. There has to be more to it than just that. So actually, that's probably not a path that would be available.
Okay, well, and I guess we'll get to that because I don't see any issue. In fact, I drove the BRD 1 district, and there is a dentist's office at the very end of it.
Yes, there
I'm
is.
sure it's been grandfathered in.
Yep.
But it seems quite accommodating for a use, even the small building size and possible shared parking. Obviously, those are things that would come in front of us anyway, right?
Yeah, if somebody was making changes to a site, yeah.
So what would that be in terms of like the parking? Like what ordinance would we apply to that? Just the specific use of a dentist's office for parking? Because I know
Yeah.
we break them down by uses, right?
If you look in our parking standards, we have a parking standard for, going to the table right now. So under office and service uses, there is a business offices or professional offices parking standard, and then there's a medical or dental clinics, professional offices of doctors, dentists, or other similar professions standard as well. One's 1 per 300 and one's 1 per 200. So,
Okay. And speaking to the PUD, well, I guess we'll go there on the next thing. So in terms of the varying properties and the shared parking, is this, of course, they're going to come in front of us with a site plan, so we would be able to speak to that directly? Or
yeah, I
do we
mean, it
know much
depends
about
on
that?
whether or not they need to modify the property that they're looking at. If they don't modify the property, if they just occupy it as a permitted use, let's say we add this to the district and they occupy it as a permitted use, we might not see a site plan. But if there's a reason that the property needs to be modified, then they would. It just depends on whether or not they're a simple reoccupancy or if there has to be some change to the site.
So do you see a possible problem with the parking difference in those?
I mean, I haven't investigated it in detail on the site that they're talking about, but, that's something that we'll look at and make a determination. But I don't think that there's a problem based on the site itself and the size of the building.
Or just the difference of the uses, right? Because you said it was 1 in 300 versus 1 in 200, is that
Yeah.
correct? So that's square feet, correct?
Yeah, of usable floor area, yeah.
So usable, okay.
So changing the ordinance does not affect just the one building, it affects the entire,
It affects the whole district, yeah. So if we were to add this as a permitted use in the district, just like we did with the BRD2 district and the restaurants, it would suddenly become available throughout the district, yeah.
Kind of similar to that too. We already had a restaurant there in the BRD2, right? So this is
Right,
really
exactly.
just officiating what was already grandfathered in. I personally don't have an issue with it. I'm biased in this. My brother's a dentist, and I love him very much. But I guess it was news to me that that such a practice wouldn't fit into BRD1. Actually, where do we specifically call out what is and what is not a medical office?
So it's just done through looking at the zoning ordinance, I guess, on a holistic basis. If you look at the various districts that we have and the way we break down our parking requirements, it's clear that medical offices are called out as a separate use from professional offices. So you have districts that not only permit professional offices, but they also specifically permit medical offices, the O1 and the O2 in particular. And when we have that kind of distinction made in one district and then another district only specifies professional offices, then we assume that medical offices are not included in that district because they were specifically called out elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, my observation is the strategy of, what does BRD stand for, right? It's designed to revitalize that particular part of it to be
Right.
more contributory, more functional, better for the people renting it, and I'm not ashamed to say it, more revenue to the city that takes care of it. So if it's revitalizing that area, we're doing something right, I think. Is it part of an overall theme that's strategic to what that particular parcel has to offer? So I was kicking around an analogy with Brian earlier about how, imagine we were a sole purpose town dedicated to building the best Olympic skiers possible. Just one problem, we don't have any hills and we don't have any ski lifts. We're not doing a very good job on that endeavor, but in this situation, I think we are very much wanting to revitalize that area of town and to be as successful as it possibly could. My only concern with it is we don't approach it as a theme, for that area. And we've got, we'll call it, a therapist office right next to a dance club where while he's trying to give therapy to his patient, we have, club music going on at all hours of the day. There would be a problem, right? And it wouldn't have been deliberately done that way. It would have accidentally happened that way. And so at the moment, I don't think the BRD tries to grow this area as such, but I think it should. I think there's more likelihood that we'll have individuals like who spoke earlier that have a vision to bring a service people want to buy in a lively area. I love getting my hair cut downtown, and I love seeing people walk by. I feel like I'm part of something alive, and it's great, and I would have the same feeling if I was to go down and get my teeth worked down there. So I'm in support. I just wonder if we should do some more thinking and discussion about how to make the properties around that, the whole facade, the strategy of how it looks, complementary to that business, so that it survives and is thriving into coming years.
We do have some, design standards for that district and things. And that's something that, we've been discussing, doing a master plan update. We could certainly look at the BRD2 and BRD1 districts and see if they're doing what we originally thought they were going to do, and perhaps recalibrate them a little bit too. So that might be something, of an upcoming project for us, right?
One question on the agenda itself is called out as zoning ordinance discussion, and it says district uses medical office, residential. Why is the word residential in there?
Well, that's the next part of the memo. I would like to get through the
Okay.
medical offices
Okay, I want to jump the gun
first,
on you there.
because I think they're very different from each other, both in terms of what the use is and how it fits into the intent statement of the district.
Hey, in the vein of staying on topic, I guess, there's a lot of different sized buildings. There's a lot of different accommodations in terms of parking, and we're grouping things in terms of trying to ease into residential and taking account in how they might affect being right next to a residential. But what would be the best way for someone to find like that is it CNC bump place that's been up for sale forever?
Yeah.
Like, that's a great property. And I can consider with certain setbacks that being an opportunity for many different uses. However, it's restricted with that BRD 1, right? Mm-hmm. What would be the best way to attain the best use for that exact property? Because it's kind of an outlier.
That property has other constraints on it that are
Environmental.
outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's on some list at the state. I don't recall exactly which list, but it has some remediation that's needed, and that so far there have been a lot of people who've been interested in that
Yeah.
property, and then they find out about the remediation and they're not so interested anymore. So yeah, there's a potential use of brownfields funds there,
I'm just
or
saying
something
for
like that.
a
But
different type of use, because you said specifically our PUD ordinance says that we can't just allow, this exact site seems like it might be a great spot for this use. It seems like it's kind of restricting us in our ability to make the best use of a particular, even across the street. We love Church of Clausen, glad they're there. If they should decide to ever not, like, there's a lot big difference between that and these little offices that are like sharing walls.
yeah.
What would be the best way? Would that take us to take a really deep dive into what exact properties we have as a commission, or would that be something that we can? How do we go about that?
It's actually also something I think we could address as part of a master plan update.
Okay.
And I'm speaking as though that's going to happen. I understand that, but we are involved in the Redevelopment Ready Communities program, and the Redevelopment Ready Communities program does offer direct marketing assistance on properties that are identified by the community, and it's possible that that's a property that we might want to look at with some state assistance. And I think getting some funds together for remediation is ultimately what's going to enable someone to take that property somewhere new. That's really the main hurdle there. It's unfortunate that it sat for as long as it has, but that's the reason it has,
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just mean in general, because we kind of have a sporadic difference in building size and setback from residential in a lot of different, not just BRD1. but-
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of our districts, a lot of our little corridors, commercial corridors have that kind of,
So would seeking that avenue that you were speaking of, would that allow us to open up a specific use for that particular property? And allow for a little bit difference of a use since there is more of a setback, or no?
yeah, well, you might have, the use of the PUD that you were talking about before was really not, in line with our ordinance, but there might be an application for that use on another property in the district,
Okay.
depending on what you're doing. So I think it's already available in that respect. But yeah, it's a property that it's just going to take some people working together to make it move.
Joe, if we wanted to win at this, if we wanted to play to win, we would be choosy about the type of industries that we would put in certain places, right? We wouldn't put a car dealership in BRD1 because we just don't. Someone could go and buy the place and want to do that, and we could pass ordinances to make it legal, but we wouldn't expect them to survive at it because it's just a very small footprint, right? If we wanted the medical industry, as a general rule to be successful there, and we wanted to make sure that we had the right footprint, the right office size and right parking, my brother, I think he treats like 100 patients a day, some absurd number like this. He himself, he does this. You would be able to tell me if that's true or not. But so that's a lot of parking and a lot of people moving in and around. And if we're not careful, we'll just set people up to fail completely at it compared to someone who goes to a bar and drinks for 4 hours and gets an Uber home. So where does this data come from? How could we do a benchmarking study or something like that to make sure, are we abysmally setting them up to fail with this, or are we kind of on the page of success in the first place?
I would say enough businesses have survived over the years in that corridor that no, I don't think so. There have been plenty of small medical offices that have functioned just fine in that corridor, and some of them are working with some pretty serious physical constraints on their sites. But we have the street parking that provides a release valve if your parking lot gets full down there, and that goes all the way up Main Street there. So I think that the way the city has approached the physical design of the road has helped alleviate some of the issues that might otherwise exist there.
Thank you.
Just one clarifying question, Joe. I want to make sure I'm looking at, so I have a zoning map from April 2021. And it looks like it's the first 3 blocks.
Something like that.
Is that
yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then it changes into B1 or B2.
Yeah, well, it's CMD now, so that's
okay.
we got to get you an updated map if you've got one from.
I just want to
that
make
long
sure
ago.
when we're talking about changing BRD1, it's just that.
Yeah.
The
it's
small-
just the-
Yeah, it's just a small,
Okay.
small little.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. It is precisely 3 blocks. Yeah.
Okay.
Are you seeking a motion tonight to?
If you're comfortable with it, yeah, I would say a motion to set a hearing on adding the medical office use to
Adding medical, and do you want the
BRD1.
word professional offices added?
Professional office is already in there, is
It's already
already
in
in
there.
that district, yeah. So
Okay.
we just need to add the medical offices on its own line, consistent with other districts.
And that would be separate from the residential uses,
Yeah,
That we're
we
discussing.
haven't even talked about that, so I would say a motion for each
a
would be.
separate
the-
issue. Okay,
yeah.
then, if anybody has any further discussion, otherwise I'll entertain a motion on the part one here.
I'll make a motion to, are we needing a public hearing as well, Joe, or is that?
Yes, we would set a public hearing. on
So
it,
should
yeah.
I make all that in one motion, or?
I would say set a public hearing on adding medical offices to the BRD1
That's all I'm doing right
district.
now. Okay. I'll make a motion to set a public hearing for adding medical office to BRD 1.
Support.
Motion and support. Any further comments?
Do we need to set a date for that within my, or is that okay?
No, we
Okay.
can figure out the date,
Okay.
yeah, you can just say to the next available date.
Okay,
And
if
we'll worry
there's
about that.
no further discussion, I'll take a roll call, please.
Okay, let's see, try to go in a different order each time. Harrell,
Yes.
Fitzer,
Yes.
Redmond,
Yes.
Solomon,
Yes.
Nujai,
Yes.
Colbert,
Yes.
Kucera.
Yes.
Okay. Carry 7-0.
Congrats, guys.
All right, so we will have a hearing on that at the earliest available time, which will probably be the second meeting in February, based on the noticing requirements. Okay, so that's medical offices. Now, I left the rest of this brief in this memo here. Because this one has less to it than the other one. So we did have, this is the third time since I've started working for the city that we've had someone come in asking about this. So again, just kind of in keeping with what we did with the dental office, I wanted to put it on the memo. We had a person come in with a kind of conceptual design for, I think it was like a 6-unit building. And I don't know if they had a specific site in mind, but they had a conceptual design for it. That they were looking at some property in the BRD1 district and just seeing if that was permitted, and it's not. So I said I would ask about it, and there's a difference in the intent statement between the medical office and the residential use here. So, as I say in the memo, similarly to dental offices, we were recently asked about the possibility of doing a small multi-unit residential building in BRD1. Not the first request. The intent statement of the district doesn't identify residential at all as part of the district. It specifically called out small offices. So I would say that just from the standpoint of the district and how it reflects the master plan that originally set the table for the district, it's less in line with the original planning for the district to put residential-only buildings there. Residential uses aren't called out in the original master plan or the intent statement because I just don't think that was contemplated at the time. I think the constraints of the properties in the district may have been one of the reasons for that. If you were putting residential and commercial on the same property, like we do downtown, you know, there's.
I thought you
start to
mentioned
run into some
it having
things.
an office with it, no? Didn't you mention this one having an office below?
No, no,
Oh, okay.
no.
Sorry.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it, right? Maybe things have changed, not just in terms of the area itself, but the economy, the world we live in, the demand for housing, and particularly attached housing, which has grown a great deal since the master plan that set the basis for the BRD1 district. So again, it's not planned for at the moment. That doesn't mean we couldn't plan for it in the future, and it doesn't mean we can't discuss it now if we feel that, changes since that original master plan that established the basis for the district, warrant the discussion of it. So, I guess that's the basis for the discussion. I don't know if we have anybody here who is interested in talking about it, or if you'd like to hear from them if they are here. But
A slight background from my perspective. You said we've been approached on this before.
yeah, we've had a few people ask about it.
Several years ago, most of you might have been around to see it, but at the corner of Walper in Maine, there's a
Which
company came in and they were going to buy the house that was right there, the first house on Walper. They're going to bulldoze the house, and they're going to put up container housing. You see the big containers. I think they have like 15 units that they're going to put in. We went through a lot of time with them. They were going to put in their own water storage thing. They had parking figured out. Everything, it seemed like it came really, really close. I'm not sure. I think they bailed at the very end of it. And I don't think that we actually gave them approval. Personally, I'm in the same boat today as I was then. This is like a business area, and I'd like to keep it business myself. I'd rather not get residential into that area of town. That's just my call. If anybody else wants to go further with discussion on it?
Yeah, I agree. I support that sentiment as well. I think it's working as it is best can work now as it is currently zoned and executed. And I don't know that it would be successful commingling with businesses there either. We have to really revitalize downtown, I think, in coming years through all appropriate means, and it's got to be a vision, I think. It's got to be a deliberate intention to make individual areas of a very small town successful. So I would not support introducing residential areas into that BRD.
Anyone in favor of it?
I would like to, I got a few things, of course, as always. One, I would definitely be interested in further discussions of a mixed use. I think that would only add to the vibrancy of downtown. Joe, I'm not sure what the height standards are for BRD 1.
I can tell you in 1 second.
Okay. I want to say I've seen, of course, they could be grandfathered, right? They could be non-conforming, but I think that there are a couple stories down there.
Yeah, 2 stories, 30 feet is the BRD
2 stories,
one.
30 feet. I mean, I could really see some housing above and a business below. I think that adds to the business downtown. I think it could be very positive. Most, one-bedroom renters or whatever you might, even if it's 2 bedrooms, they're the ones that have the expendable income to go downtown and spend their money. With that said, I would like to discuss further the parking, because my biggest apprehension would be the fact that we might not be able to accommodate parking in all those plots there, and we obviously don't have overnight parking in our residential areas, or for the city areas as well, right? I don't believe that you can park overnight there. So I would, in that vein, I was interested in knowing more about like a parking study that may have happened and when it happened last, and what we might gain from knowing more about parking as we're considering all these different types of uses downtown.
Yeah, there was a parking study done for the downtown. The DDA did it a couple years ago, and I can ask Joan if we can get a copy of that for everybody here so that you can all see it.
That's just city center, though. Like
it's just this. Yeah, it's just the DDA's territory, I think, is what was looked at there.
And this is part of what I was speaking towards earlier. It seems like there's maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say a certain number. There are particular parcels within BRD 1 that could accommodate both parking, I believe, and a mixed use. I don't love the idea of a full residential use down there either. Even though there are residential, I think, what is there, a sixplex or eightplex? I don't know what it is. Right along, it's kind of in a wonky little area right before it ends on the west side of Main Street. They're just like these individual little guys that you probably have driven by 1,000 times and didn't know they were there. I would want to know more about the parking in the specific parcel, right? Obviously, some have shared parking, and there's like 7 spots. So,
Sure.
just my opinion.
In general, I support the sentiments kind of shared so far. In terms of strictly residential, I don't know. I was thinking the same thing along the lines of mixed-use opportunities, if there is one. But I think this all lends itself, from my perspective, a much bigger conversation. And Mr. Hara mentioned a vision. I think if we had the opportunity to update our master plan, I think it sounds like just from all the conversation that BRD1 is of particular interest for us to take a look at overall, from the multiple factors, from environmental concerns, residential or not residential, and et cetera.
True. Yeah, I will chime in to say that I agree with the vision aspect that both of you are talking about, that this is a major change to the BRD1. So to have a vision that was developed as part of a planning process, I think makes sense before you move in that direction.
So what we've done is we've given you an okay on the medical use down there. Can we just postpone this, just put this on hold until somebody comes and applies for?
Right. You could, I don't really need a motion really on the residential. We could say that this is something that we might file for now and revisit as appropriate, or, perhaps as part of a master plan process if we move in that direction.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Joe? Overall?
Yeah, that's fine
No
with me.
other comments? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is zoning. Nope. I got the wrong one here. Agenda item number 8 is zoning ordinance discussion on short-term rentals.
Okay, so we might both talk in this one. So as you are aware now, because it was included in the memo, the city has adopted a short-term rental ordinance that's separate from the zoning ordinance, and it provides licensing requirements for short-term rental units. It defines some important terminology related to those units, requires not just their licensing, but their registration. Maximum occupancy is one of the requirements that it sets forth, and there are some enforcement and revocation procedures. So if someone is operating one of these units and they're not meeting the standards, we have a process to revoke the registration and license. And we've been asked to look at some potential zoning regulations for short-term rentals that might work hand in hand with the other ordinance. Right now, we don't have a ton of these units. VRBO lists 1 and Airbnb lists 5. One of those is this same unit that's listed on VRBO. So it looks like we have 5. I tried to, when I searched for it, I tried to do a range of dates so that I could see if any popped up or disappeared, seasonally. But it seems like at any given time, there's about 5 of these things available. There's a lot of evidence from around the world, communities of all sizes. I mean, I'm talking up to, Prague or New York or Paris-sized communities, that a really high concentration of these units in a small area has ripple effects, and it can constrain housing supply, it can degrade community cohesion. So I've pointed out a few issues here to deal with. One, we have dwelling units in the R1, the R2, the RM1, the RM2, the city center, and the CMD districts. Those are the districts where people live. which of those districts is it appropriate to permit short-term rentals in? Because at this point, we're talking about zoning as a companion to the ordinance that has been adopted. So we need to think about which districts we might call out as the districts where short-term rentals are a permitted use. Aggregation is another one. Is it important to prevent multiple short-term rentals from aggregating in a small area? Do we want to consider some sort of separation standard? Neighbors, everything's close to something else in Clawson, so short-term rentals are not going to be an exception to that. Are there any additional protections for neighbors beyond what's included in the general ordinance that we would want to look at? Parking, it's important that parking is kept on site, just as would be required for any house in a Clawson neighborhood where overnight street parking is prohibited. I included a couple things from Ira Township. I worked for Ira Township for quite a few years, and they're a shoreline community. They're on Lake St. Clair. So they had a number of these, and I don't know how much time you spent in Ira Township, but the roads down by the lake are about 8 feet wide, and it was a little bit of a mess in some places. So they adopted some regulations for these, and I included a couple of those here. One is a posting requirement, and it sort of speaks to rental etiquette, I guess. So each vacation rental shall post in a clearly visible location the following notice or in copies or summaries of all local ordinances referenced within. So we've got they have some ordinances that they're referencing, like their noise ordinance, they have like a garbage and recycling ordinance, motor vehicle ordinance. And then a reminder that the unit's located in a residential neighborhood and the neighbors are probably not vacationing. And then neighboring property owners or tenants may contact the local agent or local police to report any issues relating to the property. So just a reminder, I've seen these, South Haven does this actually. They require you to post something very similar to this right as you come in the front door. It has to be within, I think, 10 feet of the front door. And then the other one is a requirement that parking shall be accommodated on site, either within a garage or on a paved driveway. And the owner of the unit has to be able to demonstrate that the site can accommodate one vehicle per 3 occupants at maximum occupancy. So if you have a unit that can say house 6, they need to be able to show that they can accommodate 2 vehicles, which is a requirement for all houses in the city. So in theory, that shouldn't be a problem, but we need to be able to demonstrate that. So I think the district's question is maybe the biggest question. So I think that's the one to address first. Let's talk about districts. R1 and R2 are single-family districts. You can have a single-family home in those districts. You cannot have a multi-unit building. RM1 is, of course, a multifamily district. RM2 is also a multifamily district. There's only one RM2 property in the entire city, and it's Clawson Manor, the senior tower. Clawson Manor's not going to be renting out vacation units anytime soon. So I think we can cross the RM2 district off the list. We're not going to consider permitting these things there, and they wouldn't consider having them there because they're running a specific type of facility. And then you have the city center and the CMD2 districts, which are, of course, your downtown, the city center. And the houses in those districts, generally speaking, are going to be part of multi-unit, typically mixed use, not all necessarily, but typically mixed use projects. So I'll throw that question to you now: is where do you think vacation rentals should be permitted?
Can I ask one question before we get started on that?
Mm-hmm.
If there's going to be several requirements for concentration of short-term rentals, can that be separated by district? Because I think that would be
Yes.
a key as well.
It could be a stratified standard where it works differently in one district than it does in another.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, would or Chair, would we be able to open up to possible public comment on this before we kind of weigh in?
That is the call of the chair.
We can do that if we're complete some discussion here. I'd prefer if we could, is there any way you can get these zones on the wall here for us? I don't have a map in front of me.
Oh, I probably could put it up there.
It'd be easier if we can visualize what areas we're talking about here.
Sure.
And I support you, Aaron, in that regard. I think we should do it right, though. I think we should give some notice to people to come in and talk about it.
Oh, I mean, before we pass anything, we will have to have a public hearing, but I do know that if the chair desires, he is able to open up any topic
Yeah.
to public input.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Okay. Let me get the map up on the
Just
Am I the
screen.
only person in the room? Okay, I'm 1/5 right here. With a ton of experience, so I'm an Airbnb, my name's Lisa Rogan.
please come to the microphone.
I want to avoid
Here's your name.
And I wasn't prepared to speak at all, but I think I saw your post. Thank you. So
You-
I've never been in this space. Anyway, Elisa Rogan, 110 Nakota Street. So now I'm putting it out there. I'm an Airbnb host. I share. So for the 5 years, I've lived here for 7, and I have, so I do some home sharing out of my house. And I allow one person for 1 week maximum. It's my home. No pets. If I wanted a roommate, I'd have a roommate. So this has really been nice for me. I can block my calendar whenever I want. If I have friends or family coming, it's my house. It's not a main source of income. I've hosted wonderful, wonderful people. My neighbors are on board because that's the kind of neighbor I am. I always let them know who's coming, what their vehicle is, where they're coming from, generally why, if they want to know, and then for how long they'll be, in my home. I have little children next door, so in the 5 years, I've had 0 issues. But I'm a super host, and that really, I think about 20% of us have that designation. So I get very high reviews in every indice in terms of, does my house look like it looks on the app? Check. Is it clean? Always. Do I give people information about the area? So, and to digress a little bit, I grew up in Birmingham. My first house was Ferndale when people didn't understand why anyone would live there. Ferndale. Then I was 18 years in Royal Oak, and Clawson was not on my radar, but the house found me. So I have a wonderful flipped home. It's a great house, and now I love it here for many reasons. So I'm a great ambassador, not only to the people that I host, but people who might not be real familiar with Clawson. I have hosted, for the last 6 months, a visiting nurse. So I shut everything down. I took my home off the platform, so to speak. She found me on Airbnb, and then it was just her and I.
You renting the whole house?
No, I share.
So you just-
So I allow somebody to share my space with me.
Part of the house, okay. So you're there at all times.
One entrance. Well, yes, she's the only one I ever trusted to not be there.
Okay.
My cat loved her. She loved my cat. It allowed me, hey, built-in cat sitter. So that's the only person that I've ever left in my home when I wasn't there. I have a special area where I lock up my valuables. But, when people ask me who would come to Clawson, why would anybody want a short-term rental here? I don't think it's about the parties. I think it's people who might potentially be looking at moving here or somewhere around here. They understand, how central it is and how easy to get on and off highways. I've had somebody repeatedly come who lived in Chicago with his family. He wasn't ready to pick up and move for that job yet. And he was working in Troy for an ad agency. So I can go on, somebody whose parents died, needed to come clean up the house, get the attorney, list it. I'm also a professional organizer. So, in a few of these cases, it's worked out great for me professionally. I was able to help them get the house ready to list.
So it's a really, really, really long list of reasons, and, you know, none of it was for the proverbial party. Were I to ever look at putting the whole home on the short-term rental market, which right now I'm trying to secure housing in Traverse City for myself from May 1 to October 1. Now, at that point, that's what I would want to be able to do, because that would subsidize, right, me having some fun up north. But my neighbors would know of it. Now, I don't have a camera on the property, but I would never consider not having cameras in the front and in the back, which you have to disclose, right, to anybody that I host as my guest. But I would want that. There are also decibel meters or readers. I would probably have one, so that if that goes off and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm living in Traverse City, I know to call those people and tell them stop it immediately. I wouldn't hesitate for my neighbors to call me and say something's going on. Okay, if it's something I can manage remotely, great. If not, yeah, the first call I'm putting in would be to the police. I also did something called lease arbitrage. So I had a home in Clawson, a block away, for 1.5 years that myself and a partner rented. And we disclosed to that landlord, who was a young investor out of New York with roots here, exactly what our purpose was. She had no problem. We enlisted the neighbors. I'm Lisa. I live here. Here's my phone number if there's ever a problem. There never was. And the neighbors really enjoyed a lot of the guests. One was there for a long time. You know, this is my opinion. I'd love to be involved in any way. I do have experience from my home. Then I was involved in another arbitrage property in Ferndale that I just broke it off with my partner, so I'm no longer. I've also managed Airbnbs and cleaned them. So I'm a great resource. Again, apparently I'm 20% of all of us, and I love living here, and I'd love to help. My hope is that nobody adopts the perception that it's all about parties or drugs or bad things, or it's not the case.
It's a possibility that could happen, but I don't see that in Clawson. I would see more professionals coming into town rather than getting a hotel room,
Yep.
you know, moving to something like that.
Sure. I mean, the big advantage, or it could be a family. Let's say I do put my whole house on the market. I've got 3 bedrooms up, finished down, 2 baths, but I would cap it off at, you know, probably 4 people. And probably in this case, for a 2-week or a 4-week minimum. I don't want that turnaround.
Right.
That turnover turns into problems and more wear and tear, and people who aren't committed to, you know, behaving. They don't care because they're not going to be there for a month.
Right.
Not that I think that needs to be the answer in all cases for all reasons, but that's what would suit me. You know, I care about my home. I'm attached to it.
Thank you. A lot of good information here. Anybody else have any questions?
But I'm available. I would love to help if anybody wants to set up some special committee, what have you. I'm really knowledgeable in this area.
Appreciate that.
From both sides, from being a guest
Yep.
all over the country in Airbnbs to hosting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from public wishing to speak?
Mr. Chair, may I give you a brief update with respect to this as well that we should have said
I'll
earlier?
I'll close public first, and you can say what you want.
Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, with respect to the ordinances that we already have on the books, council took a lot of time to deliberate on those matters, and it deemed these ordinances very important for all the obvious reasons that I'm sure you will as well. And if there was ever any hesitation, it was always a hesitation on council. There was only a hesitation that the ordinance wasn't broad enough. So council, when it passed the ordinances for licensing and registration, wanted to immediately get this board started on this work, and I'm glad that we're here, that we're beginning this conversation. As we have the public hearing, I would encourage you to read those ordinances. I'm happy to share them with you. I think I already have, but in case, I know that our U.S. member probably has not received them. As soon as they set up an email, I will do so. And I think these considerations are going to be very important. it was interesting to hear the gentlelady, technically speaking, a sharing situation such as the one that the gentlelady has is not necessarily covered by our licensing and registration. We have, by that ordinance that council passed, just based on one of our definition, because the owners are residing in the property. These are, the way it was set up, it was for situations when the homeowner does not reside in the property.
And so if you're present at the property, you could rent part of your place out.
Correct, and I think the
without
gentlelady would be in
this.
that situation, she's simply utilizing the means or the ease of the Airbnb website or
Right.
platform, as opposed to necessarily falling within that definition per se. That said, there will ultimately come, this is going to be a part of the conversation that this body has, and that, nothing is set in stone, obviously. Things, as your conversation proceeds here, we may, this body may choose to go a certain direction and may choose to make recommendation to council with respect to all things dealing with zoning, and that may be one of them.
So, Rennis, while
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
up there before you leave.
No,
So
absolutely.
you're saying is that something we should consider possibly including, or it's not needed?
So when we legislate in this area, obviously we do so pursuant to every city's authority to focus on the health, welfare, safety of the community, right? And as we do, when we talk, and any zoning ordinance has its beginning here with this body. When you do so, we're talking at all times from a zoning perspective. But you will have a deliberation that is going to, perhaps be broader than that. If it doesn't deal with zoning, it's not necessarily your purview. However, we'll take any and all recommendations. We're going to be paying close attention. None of us know all of this. And obviously the perspective of the 9 of you when we have a full board will be important perspective here. So even if it is something that, for example, for obvious specific reasons based on your authority, you may not deal with on a zoning portion of it, if that is a portion of your consideration, we'll take the consensus of the body and present it to council.
Okay, well, with that said, I mean, one might consider even other things that she spoke about are a little bit of an overreach. We can't decide outside of, I just know, especially since I was part of discussions with you,
Yes.
that only 4 people are in a house, or that they have to rent it out for 2 weeks, or, but in terms of zoning, we might consider a shared home more viable in a residential area
Sure.
than we would in a city center,
Perfect
right?
example. I agree.
So that would correlate with zoning. So you're saying we do have the flexibility to call certain standards out in relation to zoning, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And I know you mentioned something about the inspection. Is this on a yearly inspection rotation?
So there were 2 ordinances that were passed, and we both, one was more your regular rentals. The other one was something dealing with short-term rentals, things like Airbnbs, basically it's anything less than a year. And on the short-term, actually, no, council changed. So on both of those, they were on 2-year turnaround as far as
2?
inspections,
Okay.
yes.
And remind me, sorry, was that interior and exterior inspections?
So, there was some, we already have some exterior. This deals with certain interior aspects of it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Sorry.
Real quickly.
Yes.
You keep using the word "we." So who is "we"? Like, where did this come from?
What do you mean?
Well, you said, we'll take your feedback from this body and
Yes.
we'll,
I was taking it as administration and council.
Administration, yeah.
And
As-
council,
So if
they're
there's,
working
if there is,
together.
I'm speaking about, administration as, will transmit it to council in the sense that there may be, the ordinance that you come up with, which deals with rentals, it will be an ordinance that, you're not adopting the ordinance, you're making a recommendation. We, the administration, Joe here, will present it to council, right? Same thing with respect to items that may be, of necessity outside of the purview of this body and the authority of this body. But if there's 9 of you and we hear some consensus among you that, we've read this ordinance as, the ordinance that we already passed, and we've considered it as a result of obviously us having to come up with recommendations for a zoning ordinance. And part of our consideration, we had one aspect, just as Ms. Redmond pointed out, that, really in these areas, BRD1, this something may be inappropriate, which is permitted in the current licensing and registration ordinance that council has already passed. If such a conflict arises, of course, we'll have to address it with council. We'll have to say, council, and in that case, the we will be, administration. I will do so, Joe will do so, on whomever it may fall. We'll present it to them and we'll say, just so you know, the zoning board, reviewed the ordinance that this body passed, came up with certain conclusions, reached this proposed ordinance on the zoning aspect, but also you ought to consider this particular divergence that you have between the two. Perhaps we need to amend something. Either you amend the proposed ordinance that's coming from the planning commission, or you amend your ordinance to bring them both into to sort of jive with one another.
I guess I asked because it kind of wasn't clear to me whether, I know it didn't come from the planning commission. The planning commission did not cry out, please, God, do something. We need this ordinance immediately. It didn't happen that way.
Of course not.
And from my understanding, it didn't happen from council either.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
But it came out from somewhere, so the administration
Yes,
had
sir.
this problem. So
Well, we recognize the reality, and the administration recognizes a certain reality. The reality, which the gentle lady indicated she's 20% of, right? We have these Airbnbs that are operating in town, but we sort of know them because we can check Airbnb, I suppose, but we haven't licensed them. We haven't registered them in any way, shape, or form. They're just sort of a fact of life. Obviously, when we talk about health, safety, welfare of our community, of this community, we need to take that into consideration. We need to make sure that we know that whatever product is out there being marketed to people who are coming into this town, and our neighbors as well, obviously, whatever this product is, it needs to be licensed. It needs to be inspected to make sure, just like any other sort of business that we have in town, right? We needed something and we had nothing.
yeah, and the reason I ask this is it's such a mystery to me because normally the way such a thing would unfold to me is someone who lives in this town or has property here at least would come to council or come to the city manager and say, I have this crisis, I have this problem, you need to do something about it. And organically, legislation or ordinances comes out of it. And it didn't seem to happen that way in this case. It was a
I don't know
solution
that
to a
you're
problem that didn't exist yet, maybe. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be addressed.
Are you sure that it didn't exist? Because we have 20% of the reality, the practical reality on the ground here, right? I don't mean to be using you as an example now.
But she's a great example.
Not of a problem.
She's a great
Not
example.
of a problem.
Rennis,
Of the
was there not
reality.
also state legislation that was in the pipeline?
Yes.
But as far as I know, that's died as of December 31st.
Yes. Yeah,
Right?
and we imagine that may come about as well, yet
you
again, because
expand
it's
on that?
died.
Which part?
What is this state legislation? that-
I forget the reference to the bill number, HB for,
Just in general.
states were, the state of Michigan was talking about, Brendan, you're probably better at it than me, but,
State of Michigan has, there were several bills in the legislature. There were somewhat competing at times complementary bills, which, if passed, would, in various times, depending on the bill, would remove the city's authority to legislate on the issue of Airbnbs altogether. Okay? So,
Now I understand where this is going.
so
We have
when we talk
something in
about
place,
health,
yeah.
safety, welfare, I think as a municipality,
We really want Lansing to come to Clausen and say, this is where you can zone
Very much
Airbnbs
not.
and this is where you can't.
correct, yeah, correct. So, I think that's an issue better resolved by this body, as far as zoning is concerned, an issue far better resolved by the Clausen City Council. This is obviously, all of you, the 9 of you, the 5 of council live in this community, who better to deal with that issue, as far as we're concerned.
Well, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So I don't want to overscope what we're supposed to do today. Joe, can you just confirm, the ordinance isn't passed. City council's done the
We're
workshops.
doing the zoning.
So we're just working on where we want to zone this appropriately.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
Yep.
Which there might be nuances of that, like I said,
Yeah, and I
that we might
agree.
want to
Like
consider certain
concentration
things.
and things like that.
Or even different uses, like hers is a shared, she lives in the home. The fact, in my opinion, the fact of the matter is, you see things on the news all the time about certain things happening at Airbnbs in Royal Oak and Ferndale. And my sister-in-law is an Airbnb owner as well, and she is like you, and she takes very high, very, very much pride in hers, and it's like a second little home and hobby for her, and she loves it. But unfortunately, there are some,
90%
It's a cash grab. Yeah.
yes,
And it's the
Yep.
5 to the 10 that have created that whole perception.
yeah, and unfortunately, there's,
Yeah, I mean, there is, there was a shooting at Royal.
Yep.
These things happen.
yeah, and there's only so many ways, at least from my understanding, that we have to regulate them. We can't put certain things within an ordinance, they're not okay. So with those confines, I guess we have to just speak to what we can do.
Ferndale's is pretty fresh. I mean, they did a lot. So there was a lot of grandfathering, only a certain number with, it's all just passed in the last 2 years. So it might be great to take a look at all of that. There are inspections now, generate revenue for Ferndale, which is good.
Thank you. Do you know if Ferndale's collecting a tax? Probably not, right?
Don't think so, but
Yeah.
we'll pay, again, I got in just under the wire. I think you pay for the inspection.
Right.
So there's
We're
some
gonna,
small fees.
we're gonna miss a lot of the conversation. People at home can't hear
Oh,
what you're saying.
sorry.
I'm quite sure. That's why we use the microphone.
Sorry.
But thank you for that, though. Basically, we're discussing it tonight, and you want to know what districts we prefer.
Yeah, I think that's the starting point is looking at districts and how you might permit it in the various residential districts. I forgot to include the CR district in the list of districts,
Mr.
which is
Chair,
the.
I would
Or-
propose that we table this for the moment so that we can review those districts in greater length. I would like some additional time
I think you'd rather postpone than table. If you table it, I think we have to come back to it right away.
Yeah,
That's true, you're right, you're right, sorry.
postpone
Very
is,
good.
yeah,
Postpone, yes.
I got caught on that word before, yeah.
Yeah, but so much good discussion.
This is only a discussion tonight, so
Yeah.
Joe's not looking to walk away from here with anything. you know.
No,
Well, can I ask
yeah.
a couple questions with that consideration?
Sure, sure.
In terms of the city center and the CMD districts, and maybe you don't have to answer on the spot, maybe bring it back next time. What could we do in terms of parking there, where there is, as you said in our ordinance, like the Ira Township, we don't have it necessarily a designated, and how parking permits may or may not be able to work, or the police, and how we might, make that work if it's a possibility, because I do think, again, that those areas might be, kind of a great place to have more transient uses.
Yeah, I think it would be important that you be able to demonstrate that you have a place that your guests can park, and it would be based on the whatever requirement we put in place. I think it would probably be something similar to the requirement that I've got in here. But even in those districts, I think you would need to know that there was going to be a place for the guests to park.
So in city center, I don't know, is there designated spots in city center within?
Well, we
the-
require that residential uses provide the spaces. Commercial uses are allowed to use the collective parking and everything else. But residential uses, we do generally require that they have I think we've maybe varied the requirement a few times over the years, but we do require that they have dedicated parking for the residential
So
use.
that worked out well with ACE. But outside of that, are there designated parking spots in the majority of city center?
No, but most of city center is commercial uses. There's very few actual residential uses in the city center district. really, I mean, it's the ACE project, and what else is actually in the city center district? I'm not sure there are any other, let me look here. I'm not sure there are any other residential uses at present in the city center district. I think everything else is in the CR and CMD districts. ACE is the only one that's, could have more in the future, of course.
Right,
But,
right, especially if we're
Yeah,
doing
at the moment,
mixed
there's
use.
really nothing else there, so,
So in the meantime, there's not much we can do in order to accommodate a possible, I guess you said there's only one place that could be viable, right?
yeah.
Okay.
You know, if you had like, let's say you took one of those units in the ACE building and turned it into a short-term rental. Let's say you're the landlord of the ACE building and you want to rent out all the units to, tenants except for one, and you want to have that one be a short-term rental. You would have to take whatever parking was assigned to that unit and assign it to the short-term rental.
Right, right. With that said, that's also something I think we should consider is the density of B&Bs in multifamily units,
Right.
just when we come back.
Yeah, and that could be, one, no more than 1 per 20 units or something
Right.
like that. You might have, it might be as simple as a standard like that.
Because the arbitrage that she was talking of, we have no control over whether or not a lease essentially subleases as a Airbnb. I know that respectfully you've done it the right way, but some people, I see YouTube videos, they'll do it whatever way they want. And I guess, would we even be able to enforce at that point? I don't know. I guess that's a question more for Rennis. If there's people
It'd be a
arbitraging and
civil
it
matter
exceeds the
between
level.
parties, wouldn't it?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, obviously, as the city does have some ability on the fringes of that question to be able to prosecute, but it would also be civil infractions. We wouldn't be able to prosecute in anything above and beyond that. And then, otherwise, it would be, he's right, it would be a civil matter among the parties.
Right, a breach of the lease,
Yeah.
per se. Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to point out the definition of short-term rental in the short-term rental ordinance, just so everybody's got it in their head. So the word short-term rental mean any dwelling or condominium or portions thereof in which the owner does not reside, that is available for use or is used for accommodations or lodging of guests, paying a fee or other compensation for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. So the case that we heard about earlier, where the owner does reside there, strictly speaking, under the
Doesn't
short-term
apply.
rental ordinance, is not a short-term rental. So if we use the term short-term rental in the zoning ordinance, its meaning will match the meaning in this ordinance that we have. So we'll be talking about something that is used as a rental and not as a homestead.
And Joe, remind me, what is the limit on the zoning currently for short-term rentals, percentage-wise?
There's
Is
none.
there-
We don't have, we don't have anything in the zoning for it right now. So there's no zoning regulation of short-term rentals at all at the moment.
So right now, you're saying they're not allowed, but do we
Allowed.
really want to go through and break out what areas we would like to see them in, or can we just sit back and wait till somebody comes up and say, I want to put one here, and then we'll say, oh, okay, well,
I don't think we'd ever be able to do that.
you want to get proactive on this, or you?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it makes sense. My apologies. I think it makes sense for this body to make its due considerations, because, and I'll tell you this, I think I neglected to mention earlier, from some of the comments that council members made throughout the consideration of this, Mr. Chair, there were, to the extent possible, there was certainly some consensus there to be as restrictive with respect to this as possible. So I think, as your ordinance, your proposed ordinance is going to go to that body for its consideration and adoption, I think that's something that you do need to know and keep in the back of your mind. You may decide otherwise, obviously, this body, you're your own body, you can make whatever determinations you see fit, but that was the spirit of it. And I think it is appropriate for, again, when we're considering health, safety, welfare of the community, not every district will be appropriate for this. So I think to take it on a one-by-one basis, you wouldn't be able to do so. I mean, certainly we're not Manhattan Beach and and we're not having thousands of requests perhaps, but nonetheless, you want to designate it, you want to designate it properly, you want to do it one time, limit, to the extent that you deem appropriate, and take out, carve out whatever sections of the map that you think, whatever that may be, residential, whatever that may be.
Rennis, not to put you on the spot, but can you share, at least with a follow-up email, maybe what dates that those council meetings were, just so maybe
Yeah.
other members are able to watch those to have context as
It
well?
went on for a while.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do so. It went on for a while because I'm going to.
I can always search too, but
No,
you
no,
can
no, no,
email
no,
us all without,
I'm
yeah.
happy to do it. It may take me a second, but usually I like to say, oh, I'll have it to you by, the end of the
Yeah,
day.
not by midnight.
That's
We're
not
not
going to be by
expecting-
midnight, this one, because they went on for some time, but happy to do so,
Thank you.
of course.
I just to make a comment on that and to help you out, I tried to research this earlier today, so I think September 19th was one of the meetings. So I might have gone on just before or after, but that's
Yeah.
one that I focused on today. So-
I know that I think we first proposed it sometimes, perhaps even before the summer, so it went on, I want to say, I'm going to say April, but then again, I'm going to eat those words, so I don't want to give you the specific amount, but it was sometime, and appropriately so. It's, as I'm sure this body will find out, as I'm sure you already know, it is delicate. I think, the appropriate consideration will take some time. I think it's not, there's always more that could be done with the issue. There was one of the, if there was any complaints, through our council proceedings, there was one of the complaints, it's like, it's not broad enough, we need it broader in scope, or why are we allowing it? There was always those kind of considerations, and I think this body will probably deal with that as well, appropriately so. I think it's, every community, a lot of communities are dealing with it. Every community gives its own sort of imprimatur on it, just on account of the nature of the community that we have, or whatever community may be. So whatever works for Ira Township is probably not going to work here. We need
That's
something.
why I only gave two.
Yeah.
two
And I think that's what made it difficult throughout the process. My thought all along was, for council, it was like, let's get something on the books as quickly as possible so we could have some licenses, so we know where these units are currently. Let's have a registration and ongoing inspection, so we do this, we're protecting this community. And then let's add more to it. And this may not be the end of it. There may be more. There is a broader scope here. It may go beyond zoning and beyond what council has currently passed, but I think these two were appropriately the first, probably the immediate steps that needed to be taken. License, registration, inspection, and then this body will do.
And maybe a question for Joe. You mentioned Ira because you were in that town. You had some say or
Sure.
some visibility there. I guess I don't know visibility-wise in Michigan, and are we kind of leading this a little bit, or are we definitely behind? And can we look for other examples? I always feel as this committee that, as smart as we all are, we should look at those who have done something similar already and the research
Right.
that's already out there. So
So-
would love to not put that on you maybe, but also for our own research to
I
go
w-
look at some of that
I
before
wouldn't
making decisions.
say you're behind necessarily. You are acting later than some other communities, but that doesn't mean you're behind, because communities that acted earlier had a much different experience with these units than a city like Clawson or Berkeley or any of the local small cities have had. The waterfront communities especially have just seen an explosion in the number of these units. And when you get an entire neighborhood that is nothing but investment properties that are being rented out, it has a major effect on your community fabric. And it is not like that in Clawson. It is a few scattered units. And likely that's how it will remain. There could potentially be some circumstance that changes that, makes a difference to that. Yeah, there's a reason that we're acting later than some other communities. And it's just that we simply have not had the same volume of these uses and the same issues that have arisen in other communities.
Right.
And one more. Thank you, Joe. There's Because that's a very important question, in my mind anyways. I don't think, just on account of the size of the community that we have and the means that we have at our disposal, places like Clawson, like Berkeley, a great example, it shouldn't be the test cases for these, large kind of, this kind of ordinance or something similar. We shouldn't be on the cutting edge of anything. And I think if there was an impetus to do anything, was simply some of those bills that were on the agenda of our legislature, they were problematic to consider when you think about, obviously, the community being just robbed of its ability to deal with zoning, to deal with these kinds of issues. I can tell you one thing, and I think that's why Joe is right, that you're not behind. Every police report, as the prosecutor of this town, every police report's run through my office. I read every single one of them. We haven't had a single issue when it comes to Airbnbs or any such short-term rentals. So if we had any, the impetus would have been to do something earlier, but we haven't. So we're being proactive. We want to do this. We want to be able to have these, like this body and council to be able to deal with these issues, as opposed to God knows what happens. Those bills have had a way of always coming back, never having passed, but always coming back. So we want to be able to have something on our books, sooner rather than later, but at the appropriate time. Thank you.
And I guess this is my perspective on it too, but we want to enable people to do things responsibly, right? We don't want to just blanket say, no, you can't do this. We want to acknowledge that there are good operators and that some of these units in the city are fine. We're not 100% opposed to having them, They have their place. They absolutely have their place. I mean, raise your hand if you've never used an Airbnb. I mean, I've used them all over the place, and I'll use them this year too. In the future, I have one set up for late June, I don't want to lose sight of that. We're not just looking to be restrictive. We are looking to strike a balance and, welcome units in a responsible way that works for our community.
With that said, some of the things I'll just share with my fellow commissioners that I thought that maybe at this point in time, and I see that this can grow into different ways. The enforcement mechanism, some cities I saw had a hotline that you could call and report. Ours is kind of reliant upon the police, as Mr. Nushai has said, that we haven't had any reports yet. But there seems to be, I guess, being a small city, we don't quite have the municipal infrastructure of, taking calls and complaints from neighbors, and some of that I think we should take into consideration, that a lot of neighbors might feel as though they're going unheard without a proper protocol for complaints and registering it, where it's going to go directly to that said license, because it does go through a police station, but how it gets back to the license and things like that, I'm not quite sure. Secondly, Clawson is a great first-time homebuyer city. With that said, we have a lot of opportunities being close in proximity, at least in my opinion, and I express this at City Council, to Troy, Birmingham, Royal Oak, a lot of opportunity for investors that want to seek opportunities in lower pricing of housing. So I do think that those are things that we should consider when applying this ordinance, just my opinion. But
Well, I've received quite a few emails. The gentlelady's who runs the home sharing business, which thank you for, again, speaking up and describing that concept to me. I've had a lot of residents just the very mention of short-term rentals come to me with great concern. And anytime you talk about transients coming and going into a city, the good things don't come with it. The crime the abuse and taxing on the community is significant. And I don't know if currently our code enforcement forces and our police forces are set up to really address any influx of change. So certainly as a matter of policy, if this body comes to any direction that seeks to amplify and grow short-term rentals, that needs to be balanced, not just by saying the word we need to balance it. That needs to be balanced with policy, make sure we have the studies that show we're prepared for that change. And so it's really going to come down to the data, I think, because I think we can absolutely research through some means, Joe, cities that have X percent short-term rentals and X percent, Airbnbs or whatever, and those, and let's look at the demographics and let's try to find something as close to Clausen's footprint as possible, and make sure we're looking at this with both eyes wide open, because there's a lot of residents out there that are very concerned about not knowing their neighbors, and that, I think, is the absolute antithesis of Clausen to me personally, is knowing your neighbors and them being inconsistent. I would argue that if there is a transitory problem in Clausen, historically, it's been the children of people who live here leaving and coming back. There's quite a bit of that story I'm aware of, and that's not a bad trend. That's not a bad thing at all. So I am concerned about it. It could be very easy for us to be a body that's defending a lot of landlords looking to lease and capitalize with their property that they paid money for, an opportunity to profit on additional properties that are in a tax advantageous situation. I see it all, and I don't want to speak to one side of the argument or the other, but as a body of the residents living here, I think it would be very bad if we don't actively take an effort to represent those individuals, not necessarily big landlords, foreign investors who buy up a bunch of properties and list them all on Airbnb. I think we got to be very careful about how we represent the people that put us here, and I don't think that's in any way contradictory to what you're saying, Aaron. I want to make clear
No, I
about
didn't
that.
take
Yeah.
this. And it's okay if it was.
But if we don't make a database decision here with our policies and really ask ourselves when we, and I think this should also be part of our master plan consideration, but when we look at 20 years down the road in Clausen, do we really desperately want X-fold improvement or increase, in short-term rentals? Do we believe that's the path to our growth and our prosperity for our residents and our culture and our safety and everything that goes with it? Or do we believe the antithesis that we need to encourage as much long-term ownership here, and how can we grow that? How can we encourage that? Whichever the direction may be. I'm not buying or selling in this particular argument, but I'm very interested in opening up further public comments to that topic of short-term rentals before we really get too much into the weeds about which zone do we think arbitrarily right now with the data that we don't have makes sense to roll the dice on. That's all I have to say.
I'd say from my perspective, maybe I'm more optimistic about this than most people, because I don't see it becoming a big problem. I don't see Clausen as being a draw for, we don't have the lake for people to fish in or swim in. We don't have the draw that way, so I see it more as a business structure. Question though, legally, if there are problems, can we put it in the ordinance that when someone owns this B&B and they're going to rent it out, we have age restrictions? You have to be 21 or 25 years old. Are we allowed to do that legally or no? Or is that up to the property owner?
Yeah, I don't know I'm happy to research that portion of it, but I don't know that we'd be able to have any restrictions.
Simply preventing a bunch of teenagers from renting a house and partying.
Just a second.
The Airbnb platform already says you have to be 21. So there are times where somebody tries to do a second-party rental, meaning it could be a mother, she says she's a mother for the kid.
You can't prevent that, yeah.
Well, you can't, it's not something
if you
that
catch
we're
it, yeah.
permitted to do. Nobody on
Strictly
Airbnb,
speaking.
so you'd want to know all their own internal rules, which again, I can help with at any point, should be accepting a second party
Okay,
rental.
yeah. Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we're just looking at putting more teeth into this ordinance, and I don't know how big a bite we can take.
Right, so Airbnb obviously as a private organization would have its own rules, right, for whatever reason. When this body legislates or when council adopts whatever this body produces, you'll be legislating across the board, right? Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter what platform you use, you're going to be legislating. So we're going to go above and beyond those rules. If there is a way to, I understand your question and I will look into it. If there's a way to limit it, I'll provide that way, and then this body will consider it. But knowing what I know, I would imagine we would have a difficult time with it.
City has ordinance, you're not going to be able to trash the place, you can't
Well,
make too much
absolutely.
noise late at night.
Everything else already applies, absolutely. All our noise ordinance.
I just didn't know how far we could go with that.
Yeah. I think it's just age can be problematic with in this area. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Joe, there was, either it was the MML or the National League of Cities, one of them put out a good neighbor policy, which I thought was interesting, and it's kind of in line with what you were talking about with Ira Township. I don't know if that's something I can maybe send to you that you can look over and see if there's any points or share with the members at our next discussion.
Sure.
But it seemed to be kind of like kind of what you were getting at there, is, I don't even know if we're allowed to talk about like regulating trash and things like that, because that's one thing I know can become a hindrance and also cause health and safety concerns for garbage that might be sitting out in someone's yard for weeks. But that was, I think, addressed in the Good Neighbor policy. I think it kind of gives an overall quick breakdown of how those work.
You go any further with it, Joe, or?
I mean, we can, bring you some more information and allow you to study further and
Yeah, I think I'd like
pick
to
up the conversation at the in the
postpone it.
future.
And if we can get the printed copies of the zones in front of us, so we know what we're talking about on that zone.
Joe, on top of that, some of the additional information I think I would be interested in is I guess with respect to the aggregation piece of it. Are there any examples in preventing the gathering of multiple short-term rentals in one space? Along those lines, if there are examples of that, from my perspective, I'd like to avoid the aggregation effect of it, but also being, I know we're talking about some of these specific zones or districts, but if we do establish some sort of separation, then we risk also just zoning it out.
Right, yeah.
So
You gotta
also
be
wanting to be
careful.
mindful to prevent that.
Yep. Okay, yes, I can provide some of that.
Yeah, if you can give us more clarity on that. Are we done? Okay, if everybody's happy, we'll move on to Planning Commission 2022 Annual Report.
Right. And I have provided that for you. And we do this every year. It's actually mandated by the Michigan Planning Enabling Act that the Planning Commission prepare an annual written report to City Council. The City Council, once you forward it to them, receives it and files it. But it just summarizes what the Planning Commission did last year, and in very general terms. And if there are any questions or comments, or if you see a correction, please let me know. But otherwise, you would have a motion to accept and forward the report.
Just one on 650 North Rochester Road. I heard that didn't end up being pursued by that.
No, never panned
right?
out, no.
So maybe just one amendment is to reflect that, just to say that that didn't happen, and we.
Yeah, it was discussed, but nothing ever came of it, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's necessary or not. I mean, I just.
Probably not necessary, but I just added it to the Word version of the document, so I can just resave the PDF.
I kind of look at this document as what did we get right, what did we get wrong, and I like the I like the concept that council especially can go through here and look at all these businesses that got here. You know, we did some good things, or we lost some businesses, you know, and have it be a little bit of a gauge of how well we're doing kind of thing. So I don't know. It's a very minute point. Forgive me for even bringing it up.
Joe, my years are blending a little bit. Was our caregivers discussion in 22 or in 21?
It happened over the course of a couple of years.
Okay.
So
Maybe that's why.
it did bleed into 22. Yeah.
Because I didn't see that unless, is that in here?
Or well, no, I guess it must have been in 21 because that was it would have been 21 because it was before the election. Yeah, so it was 21. Yep.
Okay, if everybody's happy, you need a motion to accept it?
Yes, accept and transmit to City Council.
I need a motion to that effect.
I'll make a motion that we accept the, are we amending that, right? As amended?
I can make that
Okay,
motion.
the 2022 Planning Commission Annual Report is amended, and give Joe permission to send it on to council.
Support.
Motion, support. Can I have roll call, please?
Yes. Fitzer.
Yes.
Redmond.
Yes.
Solomon.
Yes.
Nushai.
Yes.
Colbert. Kucera.
Yes,
Hara. All right. Thank you.
passes.
We'll get that on to council.
Agenda item number 10 is the election of officers, which I believe we have our
Parliamentarian.
parliamentarian.
I'll cede the floor.
Good evening. So every year you do this, you elect your officers. I sent, Ms. Redmond reached out to me and she was asking a couple of questions with respect to the process. So in answering that, it occurred to me, well, obviously this is part of your bylaws and I'm sure, you know, those are available to all of you, but I figured I'd put that, the quick procedure in writing to you, it was made part of your packet as well. So obviously there's 3 positions. Those 3 positions, you could go in order. Anyone can, sort of put their candidacy up front with respect to any of those positions, and they can keep going until they get elected or until, and we also keep going until we have sufficient votes for each position. So anybody can apply. The voting and both the announcement of the candidacy is that open process that can be sometimes strange and cumbersome in the sense that we can't, every conversation has to happen here in front of the cameras. So anybody that wishes, can announce their wish to be voted or to be considered for a particular position. My recommendation, of course, always is you do so by way of motion, and you can motion somebody, you can motion yourself. You could do whatever you please in that regard. And we just keep going through the votes one after the other. And then I would recommend, as typically is done, is you always do the chair, vice chair, and then the secretary.
Mr. Nushai, just reading your letter, I'm not sure what it's answering, what questions it's answering. I appreciate the information, I just don't know what the question was.
The question was, what is the process?
Okay.
And that's why, that's exactly, that's actually a fair point. You're right. I received that answer, and I answered that question. And I answered it. But that was what is the process? How do we go about it? And that's basically, I took from the bylaws that we have, that this body has adopted, and I gave you those snippets that are the relevant portions of the bylaws with respect to this, and then a process to be followed. And it always has been the same process. There's nothing new or anything like that. But I figured nobody had ever, I think, asked me any questions with respect to it, and so I had never put down any thoughts. I looked back to my predecessor to see if he had ever addressed any questions with respect to the election of officers. He hadn't either, so I figured this was the time. Might as well put it in there. But obviously, your bylaws are abundantly clear as well.
With that said, I was asking Mr. Nushai how I might go about putting myself out there, which I'll do now, as a consideration for chair. I know it was something that I discussed doing years back, but I wanted to see the proper way that I might do that. So officially, I would love the opportunity to seek a nomination for chair. So, and I wanted to make sure I respected the process of that when doing it.
Was that a motion for yourself?
Well, I guess I have to make a motion for myself,
Yeah,
or,
I would-
I thought I
mean, the
solicit
body
a
moves-
nomination.
That's
Okay.
fine. The body moves by resolution, obviously, by motion. So I would recommend that you do a motion, even if it is for yourself.
Oh.
A motion, and then that would require support. If there is support, then the body would vote. If you get sufficient votes, obviously the person wins. If it doesn't, second nomination. And we keep at it for as long as it takes.
Okay. All right, well.
I appreciate you just saying that.
Yeah.
So it's clear. And so then anyone else, we should do this at this time, right?
Yeah, at any time, yeah, throughout, yeah, absolutely, until we fill all three positions. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So that would be my motion then. I suppose I should alter that as I would like to motion myself as a nomination for chair.
And then we would accept that.
Is there a
Or
second? Yeah.
second
We
or
operate by way of a
vote.
second. Is there a second?
And is the vote immediately after that, or can we give other
Yeah,
people?
you vote, well, because there's a motion on the floor, you would vote. If it fails, you move on to the next person, and so on and so forth.
Sorry.
Support.
Well, hold-
But if it fails, that means that no one else stands a chance then.
Then we would call another nominee,
The way you're
right?
cutting the deck is whoever calls the card first wins. See my point?
I guess I see your point, yes, to answer your question.
Something doesn't seem quite right there.
If I can interject,
Sure.
City Attorney, after the second, when there's discussion,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be appropriate then if any other nominee suggested that they would socialize, they would have their issues as well?
I think that makes sense. Mr. Chair, I think that would address the issue. Thank you, actually, for that. I appreciate it. I think, does that, I would think that would address the issue. Your bylaws speak to this, to this format, the way I read them. But your point is actually well taken. So in that sense, during discussion, just because there is a motion on the floor, you'll have discussion, anybody can announce their candidacy as well at that time or at any time. Obviously, you can do so, this is the time to do it.
Could we make a motion for someone else? Nothing.
Well,
There's already a motion on the floor right now.
Yeah, there's a motion. on the
well, or you said the other candidates can speak up at this point,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, so you don't need a motion necessarily.
I guess I'm
Right.
unclear, though, who else we could vote for. We're going to have a roll call at the end of this discussion, and it only involves your motion to be chair.
So if we
But
don't
then you
move
vote me
forward,
down with knowing that there's another one coming.
Correct.
Okay.
is there opportunity to make two motions on yourself?
On the same person, absolutely, of course. Yeah, we're here, obviously, to the point, we're here until we elect all three individuals, right? All three people.
Yeah.
The first motion would be
So it may fail the first time, we may get it the fifth time, for all I know.
2-3 people say they want to be chair.
When is the appropriate time
Okay.
to ask
Also make a second.
candidates who are,
Someone else to get shot down. You know what I'm saying?
Right, okay.
guess,
I got you.
accepting
Oh,
that?
Yeah, I think, was there a second?
There was a
There was a
second.
Okay, if there's
Yeah.
a second, now's the time.
now-
Discussion.
Is there anybody else interested?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Thank you, thank you.
I'll throw my hat in the ring.
I'm not interested in that, but I guess I would be interested. Aaron, what is your vision, I guess, for the chairmanship? What would you,
Just seeking a more leadership role, I suppose. I believe I've put in lots of years of work, and I know Greg has served in the past and has served now. I'm simply seeking that opportunity as well.
and so now what?
Open discussion until the chair says it's time to call the motion, to call the vote.
All right, well,
Does anyone else want
Say anything,
to
speak,
run for chair?
run for chair.
Because we're only on the one position right now.
so in principle, if we have a roll call and everyone votes for Aaron, Aaron is the next chair. If we don't have a quorum, or if we don't have a majority?
Correct. If you don't have a majority, then it moves on, second motion. Somebody else
Okay.
makes a motion. In this case, I would imagine there would be a motion from Mr. Becerra.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess since we're open to discussion, I don't know if I can ask this now, but if there's someone that's not present, like I know last meeting, do people have to be here to accept things?
No.
Or,
I talked to Mr. Watson this afternoon, and this has been done in the past. He's not going to attend tonight, but I asked him if he would accept the position of vice chair, which he now holds, if he was so voted, and he said yes, he would.
and that you're allowed to do that?
Yeah,
through-
the body can move, you can motion to appoint anybody that is a member of the
Okay.
body. So Mr. Watson's nomination, yeah, anybody here can make that motion.
The person has to accept it, though.
At the same
Well, no,
meeting?
No, it doesn't have to be at the same meeting.
Okay.
Well, that's why
There's
we
nothing
didn't-
in your bylaws that says that.
That's why we didn't hold the election last time, because Mr. Watson wasn't here and Aaron wasn't here, and I thought that uncomfortable to try to
Yeah.
put them into a position when they're not here to vote on it.
That's very I very much appreciated that. That's why I wanted to get clarification on, in the future, if members need to be present to be, obviously, I'd have to be here to nominate myself, but, but other than that, you don't have to be here to
No, I mean,
accept.
the body moves forward, the business of the body gets done. I mean, I think, I believe Mr. Hara is the one that mentioned last time, it's like, why don't we vote today? You could, absolutely. Doesn't matter. It could be, so long as you have a quorum, the body conducts its business. And I think with respect to the adoption of this, I mean, but again, to answer your question, I think your bylaws are silent with respect to the issue of whether they have to accept it or not. I mean, we take it on faith, based on your conversation, but the body can move. If there's a second and a vote, the position would be his. If he comes in next time and says, thank you very much for the honor, but I choose not to, at that time, we'll have another vote, another election of the officers. Maybe we may have to notice that, but yes.
Just a question, I guess, keeping on with discussion then. Aaron, if for whatever reason I was not inclined to vote for you for vice chair, or for chairman, would you consider vice chairman?
Am I allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
this
mean,
is
I
open
would.
discussion, so
Yeah,
yeah, by
okay.
all
I mean,
means.
I didn't know, okay, so that wasn't formal. Yes, of course, and of course, I very much respect our chair now, and very much respect anybody and what they decide, so yes, I would.
All right.
And I apologize for the naive question. Is there an area where I can see defined roles for, or defined responsibilities for the roles that we're talking about?
Yeah, I opened it up.
It's in the bylaws.
It's in the bylaws.
Okay.
And then under Article 4, officers, Section 1, it states, "The officers of the Planning Commission shall be a chairperson who shall preside at all meetings and shall have such other duties as further prescribed in the bylaws and shall have authority to preside at all adjourned meetings and call and preside at all special meetings. A vice chairperson who shall, in the absence of the chairperson or his or her inability to act, preside at all regular, adjourned, or special meetings, public hearings, or committee meetings of the Planning Commission, and shall have the power to function in the same capacity as the chairperson. A secretary who shall have the authority to execute documents in the name of the Planning Commission and shall perform such other duties as the Planning Commission may from time to time determine."
Thank you for that.
Of course.
I just want to make sure I understood, like, the
No.
chairman had to be here, present at every single meeting, things like that. That may
Absolutely.
impact my
I think there's
decision-making.
Absolutely. There's a Section 2 of that, maybe this is, it states, "The officer of the Planning Commission shall be elected each year for a one-year term by the Planning Commission at their first regular meeting held in each calendar year, and shall hold office until the successors are elected or and assume office."
And just to clarify, the chair doesn't have to be here for every meeting.
No.
The vice chair would step in for the chair.
Correct.
Essentially,
Correct.
okay.
Well, just to build on to the conversation, then, I just would like to really highlight, I'm very happy that you ran. I think it shows that we have
I ran.
a lot of effort and passion to contribute to the Planning Commission. And I've been a part of a number of organizations where basically nobody stepped up, and there was no competition, and that wasn't as great an organization as the organization that has a lot of people that are sort of really trying to lead with passion. I think you would be fantastic vice chairman. I really appreciate the stability that our current chair provides and his background, his history. It's so far back, and it really, I respect Mr. Casara's, I guess, wisdom in letting conversations go quite with a long leash, but at the same time having a limit to that leash, so that no one's voice is sort of suppressed and everyone's voice is given a chance to be heard. And actually, you don't probably appreciate it, but I think Mr. Casara, in his power to manage these meetings, does so in a way with some leniency for some Robert's rules. If he wanted to, he could be much, much more infringing upon our conversations and our dialogues, and maybe that would make for shorter meetings, which would be good. Wouldn't be bad. But at the same time, I think if we're stifling voices, it's really, really bad too. But how do you balance that? I think that takes a lot of experience, and I really do trust Mr. Casara to keep doing that. And I think it's a critical time to keep that balance here.
Well, I'm,
Yeah.
it's,
Possible.
do you feel as though?
Thank you for the endorsement.
Do you feel as though during meetings I stifle voices by any means?
No.
Or, okay, just wanted to clarify. All right.
Not at all.
Yeah,
No.
okay. I try hard not to.
And we stand where now?
Motion on
call
the
for a
floor,
vote.
discussion, if discussion.
Whoa! Call the repairman.
A different life.
Literally drop the mic and walk away.
Beneath this very sort of fatty exterior lie muscles that
I just made a note to myself to never lean on that thing.
Yeah,
you saw it here first.
that'll come out of your paycheck.
Yeah, right. It's time, we need a new one. If there's no further discussion, obviously, if everybody's spoken, yeah, then you, Mr. Chair, you'd call the vote, and we'd have the vote on this motion on the table, and then we continue on if this one doesn't get sufficient votes.
So we're going to have two votes. We're going to have a vote first on Aaron and then a vote on me. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Okay, then,
And then, and we keep at it until we get to the required numbers for chair, then same process, vice chair, same process, secretary.
so I call just roll.
All right.
So you want?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, my current system, Nick is not here. Mr. Nushai,
Yes.
Mr. Colber.
On which,
Motion, this is a motion to appoint Ms. Redmond as chair.
no.
Mr. Casera,
No.
Mr. Hara,
No.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
No.
All right.
I would like to abstain, but I don't feel like I have the understanding yet to take the formal decision.
All right, so then, is there a second motion? Anybody care to make a second motion?
This is the second motion that I
Be appointed as chair.
put my name in the hat for too. And, do I need support on that?
Yes, we would need a second.
Support.
Support.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Roll then.
Mr. Nushai, sorry, I follow the same.
No.
Mr. Nushai, Mr. Colber,
Yes.
Mr. Casera,
Yes.
Mr. Hara,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer,
No.
Ms. Redmond,
No.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Casera.
You counted that?
I did. And if we didn't, we just had one of those fake elections and you won.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to nominate Aaron Redmond as vice chair.
Support.
Any discussion?
At the same time, I would like to recommend that Scott Watson remain in as vice chair.
I obviously don't support that. I think Scott is very, he does not act with full decorum, and I think that he doesn't serve very well as a leader of our commission.
And I, in my limited time with this commission, have noticed that Aaron's always been prepared with plenty of thoughts, and I've seen you more than I've seen Scott. So, I mean, on that decision alone, that's the reason for my support.
Okay, so I didn't get a second on Watson, so that just drops then, right?
Well, that's part of the
we will-
that's part of discussion, because there was a motion for Aaron, so just like as in your earlier situation, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
neat.
You only need a
That's not
second
motion
on the first
floor.
motion.
You only need a second on the first motion. There is no motion from Mr. Watson yet. You've just announced that he's interested in the position. So again, if this motion fails, then we would vote, there would be a second motion for Mr. Watson, which would require a second at that time. If he's voted on, he would get on.
It was a lot harder than I remember it being.
Parliamentarian.
I guess.
We're following Robert's rules, I guess.
Better write this down for next year. Yeah.
Hence, like, point well made.
Okay, does anyone else want to throw their name in the hat for vice chair? Seeing none, then I should call roll.
Yeah. Mr. Nushay,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert,
Yes.
Mr. Becerra,
Yes.
Mr. Hara,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon.
Yes.
Congratulations, ma'am.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
And then,
Last but not least.
not that I want to get to the bar, but I would like to make a motion for Josh Solomon to be the secretary.
Is there a second?
Support. I don't,
And you're free to decline, of course.
what?
Will you accept the position?
The eyes of Clausen are upon you, but by all means, do say no.
And at this stage, I wouldn't
both eyes.
feel confident being able to do a better job than others on this committee.
Secretaries don't do anything. I don't even know why they're there. Like, I think I signed one piece of paper in 3 years. I don't even think you need me for that. Can't the clerk do that?
Their job is supposed to sign off on the meeting minutes from the previous meeting.
I've never signed a piece of paper except for like, I don't know, 3 years ago.
This is a hazing, is what I know.
Enjoying it.
I'm not trying to minimize your, but you don't need a special level of knowledge, just so you know. Don't be disappointed when nobody's sending you emails, dear Mr. Secretary, because I never got one, so.
What will you do in life without these amazing positions? This-
If I can decline, I would.
You can decline if you
Yeah,
want.
then-
If you prefer, that's good to know.
But then we got to find somebody else that's going to get stuck with it.
I presume you're withdrawing your motion.
I'll
making
withdraw
ano-
my motion.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'll make another motion for our new commissioner. What?
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Sorry.
Is it okay?
Of course.
Yeah,
Of
no,
course.
I didn't know.
Do you want to be secretary now, Aaron? I mean, it was 5 minutes.
I don't know why you'd make a motion for, never mind, I'll wait till discussion.
I
Okay.
wanted Josh, but Josh, I respect that, that's fine. I'd like to make a motion for Brian Colbert, our new commissioner, to be secretary. Remember, this involves a signature or two annually, and it's everything Redmond.
At this point, I respectively decline.
All right, all right. This is a hard job to fill.
That one signature got me.
Mr. Nushay, would you be interested in secretary?
I would like to nominate Mr. Hara for this position.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All right, fine. Power of the pen. I accept.
Since you have the pen in your hand, might
Right.
as well. let's
I
get
have to
this
say
done.
it was DocuSign. Sorry.
What?
Yeah, no pen
You don't need that
needed.
pen.
Totally ruins it for me. I withdraw. No,
You will accept it?
I'll accept it. Let's go.
Okay. We're good. Nobody else wants it?
Oh, wait, don't we have to vote on it
Yeah,
still?
I'm waiting for the discussion to end whenever
Yeah,
the chair
Nobody
calls.
else wants to throw their hat in for it, obviously, so we'll just call roll call.
Mr. Nushay?
All right.
Yeah. Mr. Colbert?
Yes.
Ms. Sarah?
Yes.
Mr. Hara?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond? Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr.
Congratulations.
Hara.
Oh, I feel great. I just.
Listen, you guys make me feel really bad about the last 3 years I've been on commission here. Jeez, nobody wanted it. All right.
Congratulations.
It's harder than I recall it being in the past.
Slightly more fun, but
Agenda item number 11 is other business. There is no other business tonight?
I don't know if it's the appropriate time, but I had a question about something that came up in the last meeting around the next steps for the review of the master plan. Do we have an update on where we stand? Because I believe administration wanted to go back, review any, current updates or progress made, and then come back.
All right, so an explanation, I understand that there was a little bit of maybe a miscommunication or misunderstanding at the last council meeting, or planning commission meeting, in regards to a recommendation to the council to move forward with some type of updating of the master plan. So what I did was I intervened, and what happened was when I interviewed for this position, one of our tasks was to take a look at the master plan and look at one of the goals and assess, hey, what's important and why, and basically, and so when I was looking at this, I'm like, I had to reach out to the HR headhunter. I was like, am I to assume that none of this stuff was accomplished? And I had suggested during my interview, like, we should have like a visual kind of like indicator as far as like an easy way to assess where this plan is at. And I had suggested at the time, like a street light, red, yellow, green, and then also inject orange in there as another gradient of accomplishment. And so as this was like moving forward, I injected myself with Nick and with Joe, and I said, hey, this is something that I literally interviewed on, and I would like for us to at least, and I was interviewed, and they hired me. I was like, let me deliver on that report back to you so that it's more readily consumable by Joe Public, so that we know where we're at as far as what was accomplished with those goals and objectives. And in conversation with Councilman or Planning Commissioner Hara, I had mischaracterized my communication with the chair. I had talked to Mr. Casera about it. I thought I sent you an email. It turns out I sent an email about the pavers you had. So I think what happened at the time is you brought up something about pavers. I emailed you about it, and then we had a communication. We talked, and I just in passing had a conversation with you about bringing that to fruition. So my apologies that I mischaracterized that. That was not intentional by any stretch of the imagination. So whatever kerfluffle that was ensued after, I mean, it was kind of characterized as like, practically the January 6th event. And I was like, really? I mean, so all it was simply me wanting to provide a more clear report on where we've been so that we know a better way of where we're going to go. So.
Are you going to like present it to us like you did
Yes.
the council?
So what
Okay.
we're going to do is Joe and we've already met once, and so I think we'll have something of a very ease of consumption for the general public, probably at your second meeting in February. So that's what we're aiming for. And then from that, I mean, it's to be updated every 5 years. I want to say it's April would be your 5-year mark, and the master plan police won't be dispatched from Lansing before then.
So are you looking to, and sorry if I missed this, because I watched the last meeting, I was confused, but are you looking to present us not an updated master plan?
No.
You're looking to present us a format for that plan,
No,
or?
basically an assessment of like, you have your master plan right now, and you have your goals and your objectives. Like, as I was interviewing for this position, I'm like, there's like no report card to show like what was accomplished.
Gotcha.
And-
Okay.
and
So it should
that's-
serve as support
Yeah.
material for us to
Okay.
do our
Yeah,
review.
yeah.
If I may.
And so what'll happen is Joe, initially, if you remember, Mr. Casera, I had mentioned like, I'd like the planning commission to really kind of do the lion's share of the discussion, but the more I thought about it, I mean, Joe's the technical expert, and so he probably will generate where it's at and then foster that conversation, and through your recollections or your notes or whatnot, you'd be like, yeah, this, or your own personal experience, say, hey, I really do believe we got farther along here, or, this objective is red and it's unattainable and maybe it shouldn't even be on there. So one thing very in particular to Mr. Hara, and also what I spoke about, was infrastructure. So, I mean, it was kind of characterized in some ambiguous way as far as streetscape was concerned, but the master plan contained the PACER study, which basically assigns road quality on a 1 to 10 scale, and at the time I think the city was at just under 4 or right at 4, and now we're at like a aggregate of 3.7. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and we'll talk about the finer points of including that with Joe, and I think it's something that needs to go in there just so it's more clear. And I know Mr. Hara feels strongly about it, but that would be in the next iteration update. But that's something that could be in neighborhoods. It was under neighborhoods, and it was addressing streetscapes, which was a very broad way of saying a lot of stuff. So.
Well, first of all, if I could jump in, I really appreciate you being here today to talk about it and attending these meetings. I know it's an extra several hours to your day. I just want to be crystal clear, like all I was looking for out of that whole wormhole was please go to the city council and use the I word. You don't have to be specific, no commitments, just tell them almost word for word. Just so you know, council, the planning commission is tossing around the idea of using the I word in the master plan, not specific to a particular dollar figure of spending or a due date or this first and this second, just in general, the planning commission is not at this moment, but someday I hope will be resolved that the long-term horizon of the master plan should consider the infrastructure in a general sense, so that when we go to CIP project approvals and considerations, we can honestly say, looking at that document, yeah, that's in harmony with our master plan. That is it. So,
Yeah.
and so that it can be brought back after that the city council, I hope to hear you say exactly these words. Nate, I went to city council, I said, you guys were talking about considering infrastructure in the master plan, and they said, that's perfect. It's absolutely true. We are behind you. Or you better not use the I word again in a planning commission meeting as part of a master plan. And I say it this way kind of jokingly, but because I have tried for a year to get us to agree that that is a worthwhile ambition, and I have gotten quite a bit of interference, and quite a bit of it, I think, is just frightened people or fear of things we don't understand. So if you do this and you go to council and you come back with clear direction, I think it will be healing for this commission to be, I guess, empowered to pursue that with your help. And I want to also say, this does not mean that the planning commission owns every detail and is micromanaging the restoration of all of, this is not our job, this is much more your job. But just from a master plan perspective, I maintain and have done so for a year and a half now. It's a glaring omission that it isn't part of the plan now.
Yeah, it's not, it's in a roundabout way included. It's probably needs to be more powerful and more exact. And again, the nuances we can discuss. This will be a great jump off. Assessing where we're at is going to drive a lot of where we're going. So, I mean, you're going to probably do a lot of things simultaneously, just coincidentally through this review process and the discussion. So,
And just to be clear, you guys weren't looking for an extensive list or a specific one item that you were taking to council. You wanted an approval of, are we going to look at it again, yes or no thing. Just to be clear, nobody's scared of the I word here.
No. Now, in conversation with Secretary Hara, he,
I like that.
he kind of made it clear that you guys were looking just to like make the recommendation to council. I didn't want it to go unattached to what I had briefed during my interview and what I was hired to do. So that's why I inserted myself on that. So
Okay.
And thanks for the update. Sounds like it'll be helpful, obviously,
I think
for us to
it
do
will
our
be.
job.
I think it will be.
Thank you.
Yep.
We should go watch your interview now.
I don't know if it's still out there. It's probably somewhere out there in YouTube land. So. Anything
Other
else?
business? While you're here, thank you for the org chart, or thank Nick for preparing
Yep,
it.
yep.
If he could possibly add the members of the different commissions also. I don't know who is on the ethics board or who is on,
I mean, it'll probably come outdated real quick because we just had you have two new planning commissioners real quickly. So that's probably where we left the detail was in hey, these are
and
the
if,
bodies.
if there is no official, for example, sustainability, I don't know who's on sustainability. I think maybe you are. But
Me? Oh,
yeah.
no, him.
Yeah. Anyway, that was what I was hoping for. If it's,
I'm not sure if the sustainability committee, do they have an exact chartered number? I don't think so.
It's technically
Yeah,
no.
Yeah,
It's
kind
volunteer work at this
yes,
point, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So that maybe not excluding them, but for the other ones, is it possible to?
I can
make a
probably, I can get you the numbers.
College try?
I can get you the numbers, but I mean, to give you a document, and it's just gonna create a lot of additional admin work that can quickly become out of date because.
No, it's fine as of today, you know.
I know,
Well,
I know a
and
lot of the
it's
names and
listed on the
commissions are on the website.
It's on the website, yeah, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say that. You can go to different
I guess
offices.
The Board of Ethics page has it.
I could do it, but I don't think I have the authority to do it.
Do what?
To pen the people on the Board of Ethics, I don't.
Well, you can write it on your paper.
That's exactly what I'm saying, though. Like, what is the official complement of those boards? I don't think it's a secret, and I don't think it's controversial. It's just, to your point, it's a changing thing. People come and
Right,
go.
there's turnover, and so I'm
Yeah.
trying to make this a little bit of an enduring document. I mean.
I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a temporal document that's got to get updated, but I just don't understand who should do that. Maybe the secretary of the planning commission. I
I got a good idea for someone to do it.
Okay.
Not the secretary of the planning.
Oh,
Somebody else.
thank you.
And we still don't have, I've asked several times, I've asked Nick for months now, that if you try to find any of us on the city site, you can see our name and you can see when our term expires. You can't find our emails.
And we were looking at the surrounding cities, the practice, and it seems that the prevalent practice is there's a generic email for like the planning commission, and then it goes to all the planning commissioners. And it seems that, I'm going out on a limb here, Joe, but I'm making the assumption that way all the planning commission is notified about something simultaneously as opposed to one person having, some type of, not that that would happen, but we looked at Troy, Berkeley, and a couple other surrounding cities, and that was the prevalent practice, was that there was a single email for, but I understand what you're saying.
I can't find that on this. I've
I
got two
can
city
speak
sites
to that too, because I clicked email the planning commission, and on my Google Docs Google Gmail popped up, and it had all our names. Because I know there was one time it was a big concern, because none of us got the email, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but since then, it has been remedied to where when you click email, it does come up with all of our email addresses.
Something was changed a while back, and I don't want to say conspiracy theory or anything else, but it was around that, when the PUD was coming in there, and emails were going back and forth from a resident that lived right next door to it. He came into our meeting and says, "Hey, I sent you guys all this email, and none of us got it."
Yeah.
And I asked, and somebody said, "Well, something was changed." Well, my email was changed from g.kucera@cityofclawson to greg.kucera. I was never told that it was changed. And I found out last week a resident sent something to me at g.kucera, and it doesn't kick back. He was not notified that it was not delivered to me.
So my understanding is that the format for the planning commissioners is slightly different from the rest of, whether it's name or, I can't speak to it off the top of my head, but I'll talk to Nick about it. I don't have a problem necessarily if everyone wants their planning commission email up there, or if it's, it makes life easy that everyone gets the same information, but if it's desirous that you all have your separate planning commission email address on there, I don't have.
Is
any
it being
issue
done
with
that you don't want one-on-one people talking to residents? You want them to only talk to us as a group? Is that the point?
I would defer to Joe on that as far as the practices and the best practices within the industry.
Generally speaking, I would agree with the premise that if there's a communication to a planning commission member, the whole planning commission should receive that communication. On the website, right now, if you hit the click here to share your thoughts with the planning commission, a mail to link with all of the planning commissioners' addresses does pop up at the bottom of the screen, and it does have the Greg.Kucera one there, just so you're aware.
See, that just goes off into limbo. That goes nowhere.
Okay.
And it doesn't kick back. It doesn't tell the person that it wasn't delivered to me. I talked to August about that, and apparently we have an outside company that does this for us, our email. And a technical friend of mine says you need an alias account. He says, which is free. He says, but somehow if they type it to g.kucera, it'll recognize that and it'll kick it into another box.
This is a problem that's really gone on far too long. We'll get this fixed.
Yeah.
Does everyone want it doesn't matter, hill of beans to me. What do you guys want? I mean, we'll
like
get
it.
it done.
I don't carry
I prefer to
that.
have mine right out there.
Okay, that's what we're gonna do.
And just so that people have abundantly easy access, right? I'm working for them, representing them, like,
I don't have a problem. And you guys, this is a city planning commission email address. It's not your personal one. It'll go
Right.
to, and so it'll be specifically.
And
for
we're
the-
all adults, and we all know it's foiable, so if you do something wrong on there, you can get in trouble, yes.
we'll take the opportunity to make a plug on this topic, though. As I understand it, our email server is Google.
You're right.
That's weird to me.
We're in the process of addressing that.
All right,
Yep.
that's awesome to hear. Okay, and is it okay if, like, when agendas go out, it goes to, like, you, and maybe you, and then all of us are, like, BCC'd?
That's for OMA purposes. Your BCC, so, because we can't have conversation between, and that's the same way that we handle council's communications.
And that's probably the better reason for doing the PC thing. That way, if it starts, pardon me, if it's, to Joe's point earlier, if it starts a conversation and you guys are all identified and someone starts, opining on something, then, because it does happen with elected bodies, appointed bodies, in.
It can be FOIA'd
unintended-
anytime, yeah.
Unintended.
Unintended, it starts, it doesn't, like, it could be very benign and non-nefarious at the end of the day, but sometimes even just something like, well, I know, not here, I've been privy to communications such as, I won't be able to make it tonight, who else is missing? That communication can end, it sounds like we don't have a quorum, OMA violation right there. That's problematic, and like I said, it's very benign, it's very, again, there's no, reasoning other than, well, we just want to know who the heck is coming and who's not, and whether I need to show or not. For that purpose, I think that's why we BCC here, that's why we BCC with council. And
At our last meeting, Aaron sent me an email directly to me, which I got, and you were in I never heard from Mr. Watson until I got here tonight, and somebody said that he.
Think about, we're talking quorum, right? Quorum is the problem, sort of
Right.
point. We don't want to get to that, but, that communicate, there's nothing wrong with that communication. There's nothing wrong with Mr. Cosera also pardon me, with Mr. Watson also indicating to you as a chair, by the way, I can't make it. Nothing wrong with that,
Right.
Or any such communications. This is when we talk about, we start, when we inch on decision-making, and decision-making, again, can be very benign. When we inch on decision-making and when we're talking, when we're getting closer to that quorum, quorum is the issue.
You're making our life a lot easier, you take away the certificate of, temporary certificate of occupancy, now you can take our emails away, I'm gonna wonder why, I'm gonna start coming up to council meetings, and just kind of, sit this one out.
So we'll still have them posted, but just understand the hazard of
Sure.
replying to
So you
all.
could have.
I think we're all adults, and I think we all know that, it's a foiable account, and whatever we say on there, we could possibly get ourselves in trouble over, so just watch what you say, be
Yeah.
careful.
But for the quorum
Same as Facebook,
I'm used to all of us being on an email distribution, and let's just say 5 of us say, I'm not coming to this meeting. You made it sound like that was a violation, and I didn't follow it completely.
No, I'm giving you that as an example,
Oh.
I'm sorry, no, we're talking about decision-making, like, when we're talking about decision-making that is relative to this body's, work. Right?
Yeah.
That's where we get in trouble. I'm giving you-
Outside of here, we cannot get together as a group of
That I
5
understood,
people.
yeah.
All those OMA rules apply, and with respect to, so we have there's a bunch of case law that's developed over the years with respect to these kind of violations, email communications, but they're always, again, in nefarious, like, non-capitalized, lowercase n, nefarious kind of things, but, where there's communications, the case law that currently exists, there's communications about things such as, on BRD 1, I don't think I agree. And then, one member starts, say, like, where do you stand on this issue? Separate and distinct, another member starts talking to a couple others.
Right.
Now we've got critical mass because we've got quorum violation, OMA violation. And then it doesn't happen right away, but, a year, 2 year, or, whatever, year down the road, somebody says, yeah, how did this issue come about? FOIA request, information being brought down, and then that triggers a lawsuit. That's what we're talking about. Those
so
are, again,
it's-
never had that issue here, don't anticipate it, but just so that you're aware.
It's not, it's certain decisions aren't made in a smoke-filled back room that we all sit down and decide on something without the public being aware of it.
We don't have that luxury, unfortunately, but
We
if the
can't even
planning
smoke in that
commission
room
come up.
anymore.
Master plan, guys.
Didn't we approve smoke shops? I thought so. I don't know.
Okay, anybody else for other business? Seeing none, I'll go with the planner's report.
Yeah, I don't have anything further this evening.
Okay, how about staff report and training opportunities?
Yeah, Nick is on vacation this week, so you'll get something at the next meeting.
Okay. And legal update.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to update you with respect to DDs and correct myself from something that I indicated to you last time. I think last time in talking about DDs, I mentioned that I was talking to their attorneys. And I don't remember, I didn't review the video, but what I was actually talking about a different facility on Rochester Road. I'm talking to the attorneys for that particular location, which we have somewhat of a similar issue. With respect to DDs, Mr. Raker and I went and met with the business owner early Monday or Tuesday, last Thursday. She will be here at the next meeting to, she'll come before all of you and we'll give you an update as to what's happening. Obviously, Mr. Raker, as did I, reviewed what's happening, talked at length. We had what I thought was a helpful conversation. I think this body will appreciate the conversation that she will bring and the information that she'll bring. She has a certain obligation, a series of obligations that she will need to do, but she'll update you on where she is and what she's doing. In the meantime, administration is following up. So I just wanted to let you know that that occurred so that you didn't think that we'd forgotten or anything like that. She couldn't make it on this meeting, but she will be here at the next one.
Okay, I feel doubtful that she would come in with a site plan by herself, so is there any way we can get a copy of what the site plan approval for Tribal Fair was and how far they made it through it? They made it through phase 1 of that program. I'd like to see a copy. I can probably dig it out of my basement, or in my garage, but next to the car.
I think we could provide one. We can provide one.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the outstanding problems are on the building.
Oh, Tribal Fair, the previous, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it took me a second to be clued in there.
Yeah, they did part 1 of a site plan, they never completed. That's all she has to do, is, from my perspective, is complete part 2.
Yeah, yes. Joe, yeah. Okay.
Is that it for legal?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments before we close this thing down? I'll accept the motion to adjourn then.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion support. Roll call, please.
Yes, no shy.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're all sleeping.
Okay, yeah, Nushai.
Yes.
Colbert.
Yes.
Kucera.
Yes.
Hara.
Yes.
Spitzer.
Yes.
Redmond. Sullivan.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.